On this episode of the Leverage Podcast, Nick talks with good friend and mentor Lee Brower. Lee is the founder of Empowered Wealth and has been an associate coach at Strategic Coach for the last 19 years. But you may also know him from the movie The Secret. Listen in as they dive into the difference between milestones and goals, how Lee got his start as a coach, and a quick preview of the upcoming workshop that Nick and Lee will be hosting together in Utah. Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast. Today, it is my honor to have a very special guest, Lee Brower, on the show. Lee is one of the most interesting people that I know, and I'm really honored that we have an upcoming event together, which I'll get to at the end of this. But just to give you some background on Lee, and this is not going to do you justice, but if you've ever watched the movie The Secret, he was in the movie The Secret, so a lot of people know Lee from that. Lee's also an associate coach for the last 19 years at Strategic Coach, working with Dan Sullivan over there. The founder of Empowered Wealth, which is an international consulting company empowering leaders, leadership in families, business, and communities. The list goes on and on. He's involved with Grand Canyon rim-to-rim hikes, charity events for a charity called Wacky Warriors, and just a brilliant person all around. Every time I speak to Lee, he asks some profound, deep question that then we end up speaking for like an hour about, and it could be anything from how do you think about wealth to how do you make choices to are you grateful for or are you grateful in? And you just never know kind of what kind of deep, thought-provoking question you're going to get with Lee, and just a master of strategy and a good person all around. So thank you very much for being on the show today, Lee. Maybe you could fill in some of the gaps in terms of your background, because I know that there's a lot in your experience. You've experienced a lot. You've had some really incredible mentors. You've mentioned a walk in the wood with the Woody. I know that John Wooden also was close to you and some mentors. So could you just give us, how did you become a coach at Strategic Coach, an associate coach? What led to that and to being the founder of Empowered Wealth? And who were some of your mentors along the way?
Okay, thank you. That's a big question, Nick. But
you have 60 seconds. No.
Okay, yeah, right. So, first of all, I started in the estate planning business quite a few years ago in Los Angeles. It was a cool firm. We had people like Lyndon B. Johnson's family, Dean Martin's family. And so by hook or crook, I was involved in what was going on. I guess I could say I worked on their estates, but what it really means is I carried the files into the room. But it gave me a passion and a love really around the concept of how does money move from one generation to the next. I've been around all these people that have made enormous amounts of money, but then confused by the fact that if you historically look at what happens is they lose that money. 97% of all family wealth never survives the third generation. So that was a dilemma to me, and it was an enigma. In fact, I actually started thinking maybe I'm going to go back to medical school. Even though I was quite successful in what I was doing, I wasn't getting that satisfaction, that fulfillment of doing it. And it was during that process where something happened where, I had an opportunity to sit on an airplane next to a lady and started mapping something out on the back of a napkin, and it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. It all centered around, what are those things that you value more than money? And I started to realize that money had very little to do with whether money makes it through the generations or not. It had more to do with other things like gratitude. If you could summarize in one word why money doesn't move from one generation to the next generation, it's usually because of a lack of gratitude. People don't understand it. Instead, they have an attitude of entitlement. And so that brought me into the Empowered Wealth mindset, where I came out of the estate planning, the financial world, and decided that there's a lot of people out there that need help in this. And so that opened that door. And in that process, started in 1995, actually, became a student of Dan Sullivan's at Strategic Coach. And after about 4 or 5 years, he asked me if I would participate in a new group that he had started, if I would become an associate coach in the room. He had 50 some odd highly, highly successful entrepreneurs. And So I did that for a year or so, and then they started asking me if I wanted to coach, and I kept saying no. And eventually the thought of coaching and learning what I could learn from it intrigued me enough, so I said yes. I have a completely different motive today on why I stay coaching there, and that is because every month I get to sit in a room with, with 30 to 40, 3 times a month, I get to sit in a room with somewhere between 30 and 50 extremely successful entrepreneurs. And it's like this amazing, opportunity to share good ideas. And it's like an incubator of ideas, because you can put ideas out and they go out like bees, they go out into the world and they pollinate and bring the nectar back, and you continue to learn. So that's what, and then from there on, I've been a coach there for some time. But over the years, you asked about mentors. Dan Sullivan, of course, has been an enormous contribution to my life, enormous contribution to what I do. And he's the founder of Strategic Coach.
And for those of you that don't know Dan, he's known for coaching the most entrepreneurs in the world, basically. What's the number at that I
don't know. It's up to close to 20,000, I think.
Yeah.
He's been coaching highly successful entrepreneurs. So that's been an amazing experience. It's been a grounding experience for me. No matter what challenges or trials have happened in my life, we've had the death of a son, we've had other things that have happened during that time, and it's been a constant throughout, along with my faith. I mean, those two come together. Other leaders that I've crossed paths with is Coach John Wooden, who has probably had as big an impact on me as any human being, including my parents. I mean, well, my mom maybe not, but my dad for sure. He just an enormous, great man. For those that don't know, John Wooden was the coach at UCLA, had 10 national championships, but he was known more for being just a master teacher and Googling. I mean, he's got more content that, that's the great thing about legacy. Legacy is not something that you leave. Legacy is something that you live. When you live and have experiences, those experiences can teach all of us over and over again as we have new experiences. So it's a great experience.
Yeah, that's.
You asked about the movie The Secret. It was an accident.
So
an accident. I didn't even know I was in it. So
how did that come about?
Well, I didn't. I was speaking at an event with Jack Canfield and some other good friends of mine. I was in a mastermind group with him, and Rhonda, she came in and she wanted to do a video. I thought it was just for her company in Australia. And then I got a call one day. Somebody said, "Hey, I saw you in this movie." He was a stranger to me, and he called me and said, "I saw you in this movie. Thank you so much. The gratitude rock I use it all the time. It's really meaningful. I just want you to know I appreciate it very much." And I said, "Movie? What movie is that?" And he said, "Well, The Secret." And I said, "Well, it's a secret to me." And so that night, for the very first time, I gathered my family around and we watched The Secret. And that was the very first time that we saw it at that moment. But, The Secret, even though I didn't know about it, and I have not participated in it from a standpoint of financially, it has opened up doors around the world. I think it's had like 45 or 50 million views. So it's been, as recently as last week, I was recognized in an airport. Just somebody walked up to me out of nowhere and just, so it's kind of funny. It's been a good experience.
So yeah, it's so funny that you didn't even know that you were in it. So in your experience, and you've coached a lot of people, what are some of the common mistakes or issues or areas of improvement? I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot and there's probably a million things, but are there some patterns that you've identified or found in your coaching experience?
Well, in today's world, we live in an exponential world. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, that we're facing today, is every industry is being disrupted with technology. Every industry is experiencing exponential growth, and we can't get our arms around what exponential growth is. And so certainly then how do we compete when we don't know what exponential growth is or how to compete in that? So time. So you look at freedom, we've always, that seems to be something that drives entrepreneurs, is freedom. And we talk about what kind of freedom? Well, freedom from money, freedom so that we can make the kind of money that we want to make, freedom from time, so that we can control our own time and have more of it to be able to do things that we enjoy doing it, freedom of relationships, to be able to hang out with who we want to hang out with and do the things that we want to do, and then freedom of purpose. And you look at one element of it, one is most entrepreneurs, because they're moving at such a fast pace, they have finish lines that they put in their life. They call them goals, and I call those finish lines. And my objective is to eliminate all the finish lines in my life. I want milestones. I don't want finish lines. I want milestones. I want to be able to look at these things while I stay in motion. I don't want to slow a bit down. So what are those things that steal time from me, that slow me down? The internet comes out, email comes out, and everybody looks, oh my goodness, can you believe how much time we're going to save? And then, time, really? How much is the email saving us now in time? Is it a time waster or a time creator? And it seems to me that's one of our biggest challenges. We get programs out there, Asana, and, Trello, and Slack, and on and on and on and on, and the inability to use those correctly. So a combination of not knowing what is my biggest future, that inside that drives me so I can make decisions in the moment, combined with proper tools and how to use the tools so that we can keep up with the exponential growth.
And this is a really good alley-oop to my new book coming out called Come Up for Air, which is all about how to use the right tools in the best way possible.
No, I love the title on that, Nick, because really think about it. People will say to me, I can remember back prior to meeting you, where people say, how are you doing? And I say, well, I just keep adding additions to my snorkel. And, I think what you provide the world is a way to come up and swim on top, come up for air where you can breathe and see where you're going and what you're doing, and not just keep adding extensions to the snorkel.
Right. Everyone's drowning in work these days. And to your point, any of these things like email could be the most effective tool in your tool chest, but if you don't know how to manage it properly, just like any tool, it could end up becoming a big distractor and a productivity killer. So
yeah. I think it's the relationship between somebody really knowing what their potential is. Really, really knowing that their potential is bigger than their existing business, that their business is a platform to who they are. And that's the target that's very difficult for most people to see. And there is a process that you can actually discover that. And then the second thing is, what tools do we use and how do we use them?
I know from my own experience, and our friendship really was created out of, me going through a bit of chaos at Leverage, a year and a half ago. And you were one of the first people to really call me up and say, hey, look, I can see behind the scenes that you're going through a tough period here. And you're like, I'll help support you, give you some coaching. And that you were very supportive of the way that I was handling the situation, which I really appreciated. But even with Leverage, even when I've gone through tough times, circling back to what you just said, I always had a light at the end of the tunnel, even if it was a really faint light, or even like if the tunnel just felt like it was 100 miles long. Like I always made sure that I could see some speck of a light, because otherwise, being an entrepreneur, it's really impossible to get through some of these things if you can't see any little glimpse of any light. So,
I had a guy come to me one time. He was telling me about, he likes to do high mountain climbing, and he was up hiking in Colorado, not climbing with ropes, but just hiking. And he was up climbing, and all of a sudden somebody was passing him up. So what do you do when somebody passes you up? You speed up a little bit. So he's cranking up a little bit like this, and pretty soon the guy's alongside of him. He looks over at him, and it's a guy in his 70s. And he says, I can't let a guy in 70s pass me. And so, but the guy just kept gaining on him. He finally reached out and touched him, and says, hey, what's driving you? And he said, my vision of the future sustains my present agony. And I think that's so important, that we have a future that's so big that it can get us through anything. It just motivates and inspires us to get through whatever. Get the right tools, you're going to get through it faster. There's two types of pain: slow pain and fast pain. And I think getting the right tools in the right place and having the right vision, makes short pain.
Well, which is a good tie into that workshop that we're doing called Bullseye, which is all about not just having the right vision, but the right tools to execute it. Do you want to just quickly maybe talk about what we're up to there?
Well, it's one thing, one of the things that I've become very good at, we do it through a process we call horizons, where people, what is the horizon? The horizon is something that, can you get to the horizon? This is something Dan Sullivan talks about a lot, is the horizon, and that it's impossible to get to the horizon. You look at the astronauts, they didn't have a horizon. Once they got to the moon, where else was there a horizon? And most of them struggled from depression or addictions coming back because they didn't have that bigger future. So what I'm good at is breaking it down so that you individually can see your target. You can see your bullseye. But then how do you get there? So if you don't have the right trajectory, and you don't have the right equipment, if your bow and arrow is not right and you got to pull that arrow back, then you're not going to hit it. And I'm just so excited about this, Nick, because you put the combination of the two of us together on this and the expertise that we both bring. It's really an exponential result, because I bring the vision, the target, the bullseye, how to get the right view for people beyond. You bring the tools. And it's not just the tools that you bring. It's not like you're going to come in and say, here's a tool that's going to solve your problem. What you bring is the theory behind the tools. So once you grasp the theory, then you can plug in the tools as they evolve, as they become better. So it's taking the theory and making the theory work.
Totally. Because tools will change. So it's not that to your point, I'm a believer in theory and understanding conceptually, when should you be using this type of tool versus another type of tool. And then once you understand that, and you understand kind of what you're capable of right now with some of the technology that's just off the shelf that you don't need to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for $10 a month, you could kind of build a lot of solutions that you don't even realize. It's just so powerful. And I see a lot of people using the right tool in the wrong way, and you're just moving faster in the wrong direction. So, making sure that you're moving fast, but then with your expertise in the right direction is something that's unique with this. And it's kind of, as opposed to a lot of these groups and workshops where maybe there's famous speakers that you bring out and you feel great and inspired at the end of it. This is going to be intimate, just the two of us working with, 20 people we're going to cap it to, and leaving with not just ideas and strategies, but stuff implemented and executed with a plan too. Because one of the biggest things that I think is happening right now, there's a lot of these groups that are really good, but then only a fraction of it gets implemented, which is a shame. So I think that that's something that I'm excited to collaborate with you on, and also just learn from you and all of your knowledge, which is massive.
Well, you know what our meetings have been like. It's too bad somebody couldn't just turn on the recorder. Then our meetings at that time, all those hours we spent in Las Vegas, that would be a heck of a podcast.
It's a shame that people can't listen to it now. But I mean, sometimes we'll just go. It's kind of like just riffing, like philosophical types of things. But are you grateful for versus in? How do you make choices? Like we've had some really great conversations just about, what's the process of making a choice? Because ultimately, what you are doing is you're making people better decision makers with a lot of the concepts that you teach people.
I would say that's the biggest compliment I get from my clients, that the people that I've had the opportunity of working with and learning from, is to say that they're better decision makers. They say, not only am I a better decision maker, but the people around me, the people that in my company, my family, they're all better decision makers because of the tools and the mindset that the Empowered Wealth mindset brings, is allowing us to do.
Yeah. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. So where can people find out more information about you and what we're all up to here?
Well, I think the easiest way is to go to leebrower.com. And, if they're interested in the workshop, they can just, you have an address that probably will work.
For the workshop, if you want more information, you can email bullseye@getleverage.com. That's BULLSEYE.com, at getleverage.com. Spelling's not I'm a math guy. And what about empoweredwealth.com, anywhere else, Lee, for you?
Well, we have wackywarriors.org if you want to see what we're doing with our nonprofit, or empoweredwealth.com. Those are the three main sites that have to do with what we do. And so I think, any one of those sites would work. Okay. Wacky Warriors is more on the 501c3 side.
Yep.
And,
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Lee. I'm excited to co-host the workshop with you. The dates are May 21st to the 22nd. And
it's probably going to be in Park City, Utah. Is where it's going to be.
Yes. And a dinner, then people will arrive the day before. We'll do some activities and a dinner. on May 20th, and then it's all day 21st and 22nd. It's going to be intense, and we're going to go all out, and it's most likely going to be in Park City, Utah.
So,
cool.
That's good. Thank you, Nick. Always, it's a blast. So,
thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Leverage Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you're interested in attending the Bullseye Workshop with Lee and Nick in May, send an email to bullseye@getleverage.com for more info.